The sirens wailed through the quiet neighborhood of Pinecrest Heights as red and blue lights splashed across the facades of well-kept homes. 17-year-old Jamal Williams froze on the sidewalk, his backpack slung over one shoulder, textbooks clutched to his chest. He had been walking home from the library after a late study session for his AP Physics exam. "Hands where I can see them. Now!" Officer Rollins barked, his service weapon drawn and pointed directly at Jamal's chest. "What?" "I didn't," Jamal began, confusion etched across his face. "Shut up and get on the ground. Do it now." A second officer, Delaney, shouted as he approached from behind. Jamal's heart hammered against his ribs. His mouth went dry. Carefully, he set his books down and raised his hands. "Sir, I think there's been a mistake. I'm just walking home from..." The impact of Officer Rollins' shoulder knocked the air from Jamal's lungs as he was slammed against the concrete. The cold metal of handcuffs bit into his wrists. "Jamal Williams, you're under arrest for armed robbery at the Pinecrest convenience store," Officer Delaney recited mechanically. "What? No. I was at the library. Check my student ID. Call Ms. Patterson, the librarian. She can, save it for the judge, kid," Rollins muttered, roughly pulling Jamal to his feet. "We got you on camera. Black hoodie, blue jeans, right height, right build. Took us less than 20 minutes to find you." As they shoved him into the back of the police cruiser, Jamal caught sight of his scattered textbooks on the sidewalk, pages fluttering in the evening breeze. The courtroom buzzed with activity as Jamal, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, was led to the defendant's table. Dark circles underscored his eyes after a sleepless night in the county detention center. His mother, Keisha Williams, sat in the front row, worry lines creasing her forehead. She had scraped together enough money for bail, but everything hinged on this hearing. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Terrence Howard," the bailiff announced. Judge Howard strode into the courtroom, his silver-streaked hair and commanding presence immediately silencing the murmurs. As he took his seat and adjusted his glasses, his gaze fell upon Jamal. For a brief moment, something flickered across the judge's face: surprise, recognition, discomfort. Case number 2025, CR 4872, State vs. Jamal Anthony Williams, armed robbery. The clerk read aloud. Judge Howard's pen paused mid-air. "Williams?" he asked, his deep voice resonating through the courtroom. "Spell the full name for the record." The clerk complied, and Judge Howard's knuckles whitened around his gavel. "Your Honor," began the public defender, Sophia Chen, "my client pleads not guilty. He has no prior record, maintains a 3.8 GPA, and was at the public library during the time of the alleged robbery. We request immediate release on his own recognizance." The prosecutor, a stern woman named Vanessa Drake, countered, "The state opposes. We have eyewitness identification and partial video footage. The defendant matches the description perfectly." Judge Howard studied Jamal's face intently, as if searching for something. "Defendant's date of birth?" he asked abruptly. "August 17, 2007, Ms. Chen replied, confusion evident in her tone. Judge Howard's face paled visibly. He cleared his throat. "Bail is set at $5,000. Next case." As Jamal was led away, he noticed Judge Howard's hands trembling slightly as he shuffled his papers. Back in his cell, Jamal stared at the ceiling, memories washing over him like a bitter tide. Growing up in Eastside hadn't been easy. His mother, Keisha, had raised him alone since he was 3. She never spoke about his father, only saying he had to leave before changing the subject. The faded photograph she kept in her dresser drawer was all Jamal had, a tall man with a warm smile, his arm around a younger Keisha, their faces glowing with happiness. The absence had carved a hollow space in Jamal's life. He filled it with books, with learning, with ambition. While other kids from his neighborhood fell to the streets, Jamal stayed in the library. Ms. Patterson, the librarian, became his mentor, sneaking him advanced physics books when she noticed his appetite for knowledge. "You're going places, Jamal Williams," she would say. "Don't let anyone tell you different." But the world had other ideas. 3 times this year alone, police had stopped him while walking home. Each time, the same routine: hands against the wall, legs spread, questions fired at him like bullets. "What are you doing in this neighborhood? Where are you coming from? Where are you going?" Last month, Mrs. Bradshaw had clutched her purse when he entered the elevator in her building while visiting his cousin. Last week, security followed him through the mall when he was shopping for his mother's birthday present. Now this, arrested for a crime he didn't commit, facing years in prison. His scholarship to MIT would vanish. His future would collapse. All because he happened to be wearing a black hoodie and blue jeans. All because he fit a description that boiled down to one detail: black male, approximately 17 to 18 years old. Jamal closed his eyes, a single tear tracking down his temple. "I'm innocent," he whispered to the empty cell. Sophia Chen wasn't like most public defenders. At 34, she could have been making triple her salary at any corporate firm, but fighting for people like Jamal mattered more than money. This case, however, puzzled her from the start. "The security footage is grainy at best," she muttered, replaying the convenience store video for the 10th time in her cramped office. The robber's face was obscured by the hood, but something about the movement pattern seemed off compared to Jamal's confident stride. She tapped her pen against her legal pad, then dialed the library. "Ms. Patterson? This is Sophia Chen, Jamal Williams' attorney. I need to confirm his alibi for Tuesday evening." The librarian's voice brightened. "Oh yes. Jamal was definitely here. He checked out 3 books at 8:47 p.m., and I specifically remember because we discussed his physics project. I have the time-stamped checkout record and can send you our security footage." Sophia's pulse quickened. The robbery occurred at 8:52 p.m., 5 minutes after Jamal was documented at the library 3 miles away. Impossible for him to be the perpetrator, but what truly captured her attention was Judge Howard's bizarre behavior in court. She'd never seen him so rattled, especially by a routine arraignment. "Something's not adding up," she whispered. She pulled up the county records database and typed Terrence Howard and Keisha Williams. Nothing. She tried Williams, Keisha, and birth records alongside 2007. A certificate appeared on her screen. Father, Terrence Anthony Howard. Mother, Keisha Marie Williams. Child, Jamal Anthony Williams. "My God," Sophia gasped, nearly dropping her coffee mug. She pulled up Judge Howard's biography. Prior to becoming a judge 15 years ago, he had been a promising attorney at Blackwell and Schmidt, until a racial discrimination lawsuit filed against the firm by a black paralegal named Keisha Williams. The case was suddenly dropped, settled out of court for an undisclosed amount. Shortly afterward, Howard transferred to another state, returning only 7 years ago as a newly appointed judge. The timeline matched perfectly with Jamal's birth and early childhood. Sophia sat back, stunned. "He's the father," she whispered. "The judge presiding over Jamal's case is his own father." She gathered the evidence quickly, hands shaking with both excitement and apprehension. This changed everything: the case, the bail decision, perhaps even why Jamal had been targeted in the first place. Sophia paced outside Keisha Williams' apartment, rehearsing what to say. How do you tell a client's mother that the judge in her son's case is potentially his father? The door opened before she could knock. "You found something," Keisha said flatly. It wasn't a question. Inside, Sophia placed the birth certificate on the coffee table. "Keisha, I need to know the truth. Is Judge Terrence Howard Jamal's father?" Keisha's hands trembled as she reached for a worn photo album. She flipped to a page and pointed to a younger version of Judge Howard, arm around her waist at a company picnic. "Terrence was a rising star at the law firm where I worked as a paralegal," Keisha explained, voice barely above a whisper. "We fell in love, secretly. When I got pregnant, he promised to leave his wife. Then I filed a discrimination lawsuit against the firm. Suddenly, the firm offered me a settlement if I dropped the case. Terrence disappeared 2 weeks later, transferred to Chicago. He sent money for 5 years, then nothing. Sophia's mind raced. Did Jamal ever meet him? Once, when he was 3. Terrence came to say goodbye. Keisha's eyes hardened. I never told Jamal who his father was. I couldn't bear to tell him his father chose his career over us. And now that same man is deciding Jamal's fate, Sophia said, realization dawning. This is a clear conflict of interest. But more importantly, did Howard recognize Jamal? Is that why he seemed so shaken in court? Keisha's grip tightened on the album. Jamal looks exactly like Terrence did at that age. There's no way he didn't notice. The courtroom fell silent as Sophia Chen strode confidently toward the bench. Judge Howard's eyes narrowed suspiciously. Your Honor, the defense moves for your immediate recusal from this case, Sophia announced, her voice ringing through the stunned courtroom. Judge Howard's face darkened. On what grounds, Counselor? On grounds of personal conflict of interest under Judicial Code of Conduct, Rule 2.11, Sophia replied, placing a folder on his bench. You have undisclosed familial ties to the defendant. Whispers erupted throughout the courtroom. The prosecutor half rose from her seat, confusion written across her face. That's preposterous, Judge Howard snapped, but his hand trembled slightly as he reached for the folder. Your Honor, Sophia continued, unwavering, I have here Jamal Williams' birth certificate listing you, Terrence Anthony Howard, as his biological father. I also have documented proof of payments you made to Keisha Williams for 5 years following your departure from Chicago. The color drained from Judge Howard's face as he stared at the documents. His eyes lifted to meet Jamal's stunned expression. Is this true? Jamal asked, rising slowly from his seat. Are you my father? The courtroom held its collective breath. For a moment, Judge Howard seemed to shrink in his black robes. Yes, he finally admitted, his voice barely audible. I am your father. Gasps echoed through the room. Prosecutor Drake quickly approached the bench, demanding a sidebar. Keisha Williams stood in the gallery, tears streaming down her face. And yet, Sophia pressed on, knowing this, you still presided over his arraignment. You set bail. You were prepared to rule on his case without disclosing this critical information. 3 weeks later, Jamal stood on the courthouse steps, the sun warming his face. The charges had been dismissed after the convenience store's enhanced security footage clearly showed a different perpetrator. Judge Howard had been temporarily suspended pending an ethics investigation. Ready? Sophia asked, gathering her briefcase. Jamal nodded, glancing at the man waiting nervously by a black sedan, Judge Howard, dressed in civilian clothes. I can't forgive everything overnight, Jamal said quietly. But everyone deserves a chance to explain their story. Keisha squeezed her son's shoulder supportively. You're a better person than I was at your age. As Jamal walked toward the man who had abandoned him and then nearly sealed his fate, he felt a strange mix of anger and hope. Justice had prevailed in court. Perhaps, in time, healing could follow.